Hello and welcome to Inside the Admissions Office, your one-stop shop for expert advice on the smart way to get in. My name is Kayla, and each episode I'll bring you an interview with a former admissions officer, a graduate of a top college, or an admissions expert. These interviews will take you inside the admissions office and will be full of behind-the-scenes knowledge, first-hand experiences, and application tips that will help you get into your dream school. This week, we're joined by Zak Harris, a former admissions officer from Johns Hopkins, George Washington, Regis, and Bowdoin, to answer your questions. Hi, Zak. Thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Kayla. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. So, as a lot of our listeners know, I mentioned it a few episodes ago, but you are here to answer some questions that some of our listeners sent in. Due to current events with coronavirus, we're going to be covering a lot of questions that people sent in about how that's affecting admissions. And we'll also answer some general questions about college admissions that some people sent in too. So, all right, let's get started. So one of our first questions we got from one of our listeners is for juniors.
Perfect. I'm excited. Yeah.
Awesome. So for our juniors, someone sent in a question about their student that's a junior. So for this summer, what should their plans be given the uncertainty caused by coronavirus?
Yeah, I think it's obviously a great question. I imagine all of the questions that we're going to talk about today are great ones. But I've been telling, friends and colleagues and my own students that we're living, right now in unprecedented times, right? This is impacting, the entire globe. It's, sort of calming down a little bit, kind of in Asia as it sort of is ramping up, here in the United States. But with all of that being said, it's still going to be important, that high school juniors are doing everything that they can to add, to their college application as much as possible, and do that in a deliberate way and in a way that is connected to their interests, which will eventually show colleges that, show them the evidence, right? That they can be a great econ major, they can be a great psychology major, they can be a great scientist because they've been doing things that are related to those fields. It becomes harder to do that, as you can imagine, when so much is shut down, right now. But I think it's a great way to almost like shift the focus to many different online resources that exist that I think sometimes are taken for granted because they are online. I think some people often think, well, it's online, it's not valuable, or it can't help me, or I'm not going to pursue those opportunities because I'm not going physically to a place. But, even, doing a set of online courses, through Coursera or edX can be a great way for exposure and enhancement of someone's interest, or even trying to figure out what that interest is, because the more specific you can be, the better, right? So if you are really involved in biology, taking classes that will get you into a more specific field, maybe like environmental science or zoology or ecology or something along those lines, I think can be really helpful. There's also a lot of other resources. Something like called Zooniverse gives you the opportunity to conduct sort of like mini and sustained research project. There's another one called Seven Cups, which deals with sort of psychology and sort of mental health, and providing a supporting voice to individuals that are kind of struggling with things right now. So there's a ton of different things that you can do as a student. And again, because of what is happening globally, shifting that focus to online resources, I think is going to be the best way right now to still maintain that focus, still be adding to, the eventual college application, and trying to still build that momentum. So when things do get better in the hopefully near future, you can piggyback upon those things that you were doing over the summer, and then continue when we can hopefully, do things in person once again.
Right. And the great thing about the internet is there are so many options. There's only so many summer programs or summer camps.
Right.
The internet is really,
Right.
it's infinite.
Exactly.
So I think that's
Exactly.
also a great answer to our next question about, how students can spend their extra time at home to kind of
Mhm.
boost their college applications. I think it's really kind of the same thing about, utilizing the resources that you can online to kind of fill in the time that might have been filled by your extracurriculars or stuff like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what you should not do, because I can sort of see this happening with some students already, is think, well, I can't do anything in person. I, just had to travel, kind of back home, or I'm not able to go to school, so they're just not going to do anything, or they'll sort of do, online classes from school if that's sort of something that they have to do as a requirement, but they'll think, well, there are so many things happening right now, I'm just not going to do anything. And that's not what you should do, right? Like, you do presumably will have more time because you can't go to sports and you can't go to Model UN and you can't do some of these other things. Filling that time, is going to be really important. So set goals for yourself. If one goal is just sort of trying to get more specific, within your interest, or even finding, what your interest is going to be as a potential college major, even getting that foundation started or continuing that momentum, I think can be a really important thing to do during this time.
Right. And not only will it help college admissions, it's just going to keep you busy, I think, for everyone.
That too.
Yeah, high
Yes.
schoolers and,
Right.
adults in the
Right.
workforce alike. It's just going to
Uh-huh.
help you stay active, help your mental health if you're still actively
Yeah.
thinking and doing things.
Yeah. I mean, for those states, that are sort of beginning to be, in lockdown to some degree, and obviously Asia has been experiencing this for the past couple of months already. Just mental health is such a big part of staying healthy and staying fit. And if you can't do the things you were doing before, or your routine is clearly going to be, shifted, it's still important, to keep your mind active, be as active as you can, and yeah, fill that time with things that are really exciting to you during this sort of strange and surreal time.
Yeah, yeah. And there's obviously, the added benefit is it helps your college application, but that shouldn't be the only
That too.
reason you're doing
Yeah,
stuff.
exactly. Yeah.
So another big concern I've seen from a lot of people and that we also got a question about is SATs and standardized testing. So the question that we got is how should I
Right.
rework my SAT test schedule?
Yeah. Again, another really good question, and it's something that we're thinking a lot about, and sort of constantly talking, to our juniors and seniors about, pretty consistently. I think one of the biggest things that, we all can be doing is making sure that we're staying updated, because College Board, ACT, ETS that administers the TOEFL, they're actually being pretty good about updating people, about what is happening, right? So, when the next set of tests, is going to be canceled, sort of has been the updates that we're getting kind of more recently, when the next tests are going to be administered. So I think keeping in touch, via email or social media within those three agencies. Your AP coordinator at your school, your test coordinator at your school can be another resource as well. But number one is you want to stay informed. Number two, you want to stay ready, because you don't know, and we don't know what's going to happen next. And if you are able to reschedule a test for whichever month is upcoming, and you're not sort of continually staying prepared and ready, and doing review courses or mock exams, or going through vocabulary or whatever it might be for each test, it's going to put you at a disadvantage. So even if the next set of tests seems likely that it might be canceled, you still want to be doing something every day, just to sort of maintain that learning that you've been doing, and so it doesn't feel like you're turning a switch on when all of a sudden you have a test coming up in a month, versus if you can sort of stay prepared every day, and stay on a pretty consistent schedule. I think being ready and staying ready is going to be really important. I think number three, and this is something I'm talking a lot about with my students, is that everybody's in the same boat. No one is getting an advantage. There's not one set of students or school or population that is able to take the test, sooner, than other people. So I think this college admissions process in a lot of cases brings out the competitive side of people, or wanting to make sure there's fairness and equity, in what is happening. And I think in this particular case, the entire world is dealing with this right now. So I think the best thing that you can do as a family and as a student is stay prepared, be ready, stay sort of updated on the news, but don't worry about sort of other people or other families or what they may or may not be doing. The best thing that we can do right now is stay prepared, make sure you're ready, when you are able to register for a test. Hopefully it happens. But yeah, it's I feel like new news and updates are coming out, pretty regularly about what is going to happen. IB, just canceled, their entire kind of testing slate, this year. So it's hard to know, what's going to happen, but I think the best thing you can do is prepare like it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, then it just gives you more time to get ready when you are able to take the test.
Yeah, I think, always preparing more for those tests is great. And there's, it's another thing you can do to stay active. And yeah, I know there's constant updates. I think today or yesterday when we're recording this, College Board announced that AP exams will only be FRQs this year. I'm sure that by the time this episode comes out on next Monday, that there will be even more news and this will be kind of outdated. So yeah, I think staying up to date is one of the most important things.
Yeah, 100%.
So another question that we've gotten a lot, and this could, I think, pertain mostly to probably juniors again, is now that schools are canceling college tours, how can students still kind of get an idea of, where they want to go? I've seen some questions about the platforms that schools are using, like Zeme, or like e-college tours. So how should students kind of navigate that?
Yeah, so it's a hard time, I think for particularly again for juniors and seniors. Not that, first year students and sophomores aren't dealing with some of the same stuff, but those two populations, just have more time. So some of the things we're talking about today, I think are very relevant. But hopefully when this gets resolved, sooner rather than later, they'll have, another 2 years, another year to sort of go through this process. But I think for juniors and seniors, and really for everybody, utilizing the college websites is probably the best resource that you're going to have. Colleges usually are pretty nimble when it comes to things like this. And most, I would say a lot of them are going to have some kind of platform or options for, online virtual tours, or the ability to, interact, with current students, or other things that you can do to really get to know a school really well beyond just reading about it, kind of on their particular website. So I would encourage everybody, to take advantage of those resources, go to the visit page of the schools that you might be interested in and see what those options are going to be. Again, although this is a very surreal time, you still want to treat this process like it's happening like it normally would. So doing your college research, getting to know the schools, really well, building, that list of likes and dislikes and preferences that you can then, take to help you find schools in different parts of the country or the world, is still, going to be really important. So yeah, I mean, I think taking advantage of those websites, as you mentioned earlier, the internet is sort of boundless in terms of what it can provide. And I always, tell students that, going to the main source is always going to be your best opportunity. There are other resources, like niche, or, even, US News can, I think, be helpful to sort of filter on information. But if you don't really have a sense of what you're looking for, then it becomes harder to use some of those filtering resources, I think, adequately. So yeah, going to the school specific websites, going to their visit page, seeing, the opportunities that they have. In a lot of cases, I know colleges will begin to even offer more opportunities to either sort of do like an AMA style format, or even just having admissions officers available, to communicate on a more regular basis, webinars and other things like that. So the more that this sort of is impacting, the United States, the more colleges will begin to offer more opportunities to get to know them a lot better. Unfortunately, so many of, especially for admitted students and for juniors as well, so much of the spring programming where you would go to a college campus for like an entire day and talk to so many people have been canceled. So I wouldn't be surprised if you see in the next several weeks colleges moving those opportunities to some sort of remote online, functionality where you're still sort of getting the same information, but you're sort of getting it in a bit of a different way. So, those are always going to be, I think, the best ways to learn about colleges. And again, really helping to sort of build your preferences and dig a lot deeper about schools besides, the name of the institution or their particular, ranking, and things like that.
Yeah, and I've definitely already seen some colleges putting out those resources like virtual tours. And I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
In the coming
Mm-hmm.
weeks, there will definitely be a lot more.
Yeah, exactly.
So, for all students, I know we've been talking a lot about juniors and seniors, but I think I've seen also we got some questions about how this could affect students' grades. So, especially for students who are struggling or need extra help in their classes, if their grades dip, how will admissions officers view this?
Yeah. So, I spent about 10 years working in admissions offices. And in my 10 years, the United States, or, kind of even globally, unfortunately, there's sort of many things that were kind of happening, whether it was other, pandemics that were occurring in other countries, in the United States, massive hurricanes, power outages, other natural disasters that were happening. Again, all very unfortunate situations. But I think admissions offices and colleges in particular are very, or try as much as they can be to be really sensitive about issues that can impact a student, whether it's, submitting the application and extending those deadlines, or something like this, which is, again, a global situation. There's going to be a lot more understanding. It doesn't mean that colleges are going to completely lower, standards, or admit students that they, typically would not admit. But I think as an admissions officer, if I was working in an office right now, it's hard to separate, what is happening now with the applications that you're going to, begin receiving, later on, this year, because it's so impactful, to so many people. I imagine there are going to be so many essays, that are written about this, or additional information sections that are focusing, on what is happening right now. So as an admissions officer, that's going to happen, and you also know it's going to impact students' grades, not even potentially their ability to do the work, but a student, who was maybe building that momentum towards an upward trend, and then they were told you can't go to school, anymore, or the school is maybe going pass fail, and then how that changes the dynamic, of the classroom. There are some schools that aren't even requiring, students to do mandated work or graded work, because the district may not have the capability to do that. So colleges are really good about context anyway, but I think in cases like this, they'll even be more careful and understanding of what is happening. Again, for a student who, maybe specifically isn't doing as well, or has seen a recent dip in their grades, it will be very important that they are able to show, if not an upward trajectory, because they just can't do that because of what's happening, still be able to at least grow from that experience and take this time to get better, in that particular subject. So taking advantage of, there are a ton of free resources online. I always kind of go to Khan Academy first, but there's a ton of resources. Online classes are now, in some cases, free of charge. Taking advantage of the opportunity to sort of, tutor yourself, kind of about areas that you're doing as well. And so eventually when you do get back to school, again, hopefully that's soon, you can sort of get that upward, trajectory or build that momentum even during this time away. What colleges are not going to appreciate is, a hiccup in grades, a downward trend, this break happens. And then, first semester of, senior year, or first semester or first quarter, even of junior year, and the momentum continues to go in the wrong direction, right? This isn't a time where colleges are going to excuse sort of those grades. They'll be understanding, but they're still going to want and hope and expect that you have the ability to get better, within those classes. So, taking advantage of, again, free resources, if you have the ability, even paying for resources, can sometimes be a good idea depending upon your particular situation. But again, going back to sort of the beginning of the conversation, you can't just do nothing and expect, an admissions officer to be understanding of that. If you're putting in effort, when you're trying, that can go a long way, in the eyes of someone who is, making tough decisions when it comes to these admissions choices that they're having to make.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you said about context is really important. I know even in regular years of admissions officers are in contact with, guidance counselors and the counseling office at your school. They know what kind of classes you're offering. So the admissions officers are going to know which schools are pass fail, which had to close completely. They're going to know all of that.
100%. I would imagine that as high schools and college counselors are making the decisions now, to go pass fail, go online, shut down completely. The college counselors are already in their head framing an addition to their school profile, or framing an email or an insert that they'll send to admissions officers into colleges to sort of describe, we shut down on this day. This is what was available to our students, and this is when we got back. And again, it doesn't mean, from the admissions officer's perspective, that you don't do the same job you were doing before, but context matters, and context can be really helpful. And again, it's really kind of up to the student to take advantage of, this time, and either, again, build that momentum, maintain consistency, or if there is, a lot of struggle, make sure that you're addressing, that struggle. So when you are back in school, you can sort of immediately kind of get better, be better, and show colleges that with the time away, you took advantage of that time, really wisely.
Yeah, definitely. So the last question I have, kind of relating to coronavirus and closures, is about recruiting for student athletes. So with cancellations and closures of, games, sporting events, how will this affect students of any grade who were looking to try to get recruited?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Obviously, sports are not happening right now, in the United States. And I know that some professional leagues are kind of starting back up again in Asia recently, but high school sports right now are just not really a thing, that is happening right now. So what I think, similar to some of the things we've said already, recruiting in a lot of ways, in the past 10 years or so has really shifted, I think, already to a more kind of online, kind of platform. I think colleges appreciate the ability to see players regardless of the sport, in person, whether it's through camps, over the summer, or just going, to games during that particular, high school season. But more and more, coaches are relying on, website, referrals, students going directly to the athletic website and sort of emailing and contacting the coach more proactively anyway. So what I envision is going to happen is coaches will sort of take that, just to the next level. And I think it will be really important for students as much as they can to be able to basically kind of show the coaches their expertise and their skill level in their respective sport. So if they haven't already, a basic way, but I think a great way to show that is obviously through video, right? So if you have the ability, and the opportunity where your coach in high school was taping games or taping meets, being able to sort of splice together a highlight film for you would be a really, great first step, I think, for any, athlete who's really wanting to be seriously recruited. That's one of the first things that you should do anyway, is sort of build that data set of, your best goals, or, your skill set within this particular, kind of area, your times, when it comes to swimming or track and field in general. So you want to make sure that you sort of have information at the ready to be able to send to coaches if and when they ask for it. I think being more proactive as a student is also going to be really important as well. Recruiting sometimes is also about who do you know. One coach goes to see you, and for whatever reason, maybe you're not going to be a good fit for them, but they know 50 other coaches, and they may call some of them and say, hey, I just saw, Kayla, she's an amazing swimmer. I can't take her, for me, but she might be a good fit for you, or I saw her tape, or something along those lines. So being able to kind of have those resources, I think will be really important. Being proactive is going to be really critical to when I work with kids that want to be recruited. We work together on a list of colleges that they might be interested in. We work on an email, and then we're just sort of sending those emails as often as we can. I think when there's a lot more in-person stuff happening, the online piece from the student perspective, while important, isn't as important, because you can go to camps, you can go to things where it sort of becomes easier to get noticed. And now that's going to be harder to do. So being really proactive, I think, is also going to be, really significant. I think the third thing I would say is utilizing your high school coach will also be really important too, even more so, utilizing their connections, utilizing their contacts, getting their perspective on the types or the ranges of schools that might be a good fit for you will be really important. And really just making sure that your name is sort of out there, as much as possible, again, because you're not playing. And sometimes you can have a great game or you win at a high level, and then your name sort of is out there because something just happened in the news or, an online resource. That doesn't exist anymore. So you want to make sure that, being proactive, getting in touch with coaches as much as possible on the college side, but also utilizing your high school coach and their relationships really effectively will be really critical during this time as well.
Yeah, and that's another thing, coaches know the context. They know there aren't games going on right now. But they also still want to do their jobs. They're still recruiting for the next year. So it's not like the whole process is just going to stop.
Yeah,
it's
recruiting,
just going to change.
Recruiting is, I remember I played college basketball, and I remember being a freshman, and we were kind of on an away trip. And our coach was in the front of the bus calling recruits like for the next year. And like my teammates and I were like, wait, what? Like, it's still our season. Like, what is he doing? And that's just the nature of it, right? Is that, sports are very cyclical. You're going to lose people. You obviously want to get better. So coaches are sort of always on their grind, always, recruiting. So taking advantage of that is going to be really, really important for any student at this stage who, wants to play a collegiate sport at a high level.
Yeah, and now that coaches don't have their own collegiate level games to coach, they're going to have a lot more time on their hands to be calling students.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's a really great point. And I think what's always important about this college process is the more you know, the better. And knowing the fact that, at this time, a spring sport coach would be coaching, they'd be running practices, they'd be at away games, they'd be getting ready for home games. That time doesn't exist anymore. So filling that void is 100% going to be about recruiting for the next year. So take advantage of that, as a student, and get in emails, make phone calls, do everything that you can do, to get on a coach's radar, because this is the time where they're going to be, looking to fill time. And if you can sort of get on their radar screen, the earlier, the better, when it comes to even, obviously the most competitive programs as well.
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of transitioning now, I know obviously coronavirus is at the top of everyone's mind right now, but as you've mentioned a couple times, the process as a whole, not all of it is going to change, and the more you know, the better. And we did get some questions kind of about college admissions generally that I think apply at all times, or kind of, when this is all over, hopefully very soon, and things slowly go back to normal. This is knowledge that still people are still going to want to know. So one of the first questions we got just about college admissions generally is how much time students should budget to finish their applications altogether, kind of from start to finish?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is a process. I think sometimes families and students they just don't know like how long like this takes. They sort of, I think, know the fact, the components, of the process, and I think underestimate almost the entire time, how long, this process, really, really entails. The short answer is that this is going to take like months of time. This is not something that you can do, in a couple of weeks. It's not something that you can do in even a couple of months. Like, this is something that is going to take a sustained, effort, really starting, I think, very focused, kind of in the spring, of grade 11, that takes you pretty much an entire year, to sort of, finish in terms of the application, piece of it, depending upon if you apply early and some of the other nuances, that happen. Everything takes multiple hours, to finish. Essay writing is one of those things that, we are oftentimes going back and forth, 20 to 30 times on essay drafts in conversations with students. And each of those, is going to take you, at least an hour, I would say, to really be focused on the task at hand, taking the line edits that we provide and then implementing them, and then rewriting pieces or adding pieces, and then it comes back to us, and then we're doing the same process as well. So even when it comes to the essay writing, we're talking about just, upwards of, 20, 30 plus hours. And that's just on the editing side of things. That's not even about, the development, of ideas. And then you have, a lot of supplemental essays that will sort of come into play as well. So, I think students that have had the most success with us are, the ones who start, kind of early and have a sustained and consistent effort, the entire time. But conservatively, even if you start, let's say in, May or April or June even of grade 11, and let's say that you apply early decision and get in. So let's say you find out by December, that's still 7 months, kind of your life, that is going to be dedicated, to the college application process. And if you don't apply ED or, you don't get in, then you're really thinking about going up until February. And then you still have to get those acceptances and then make decisions. And then you don't have to do that until May. So, we're talking conservatively about a year, kind of your life of consistent and sustained effort, over that time. So never underestimate how much time this process is going to take. If anything, be super conservative with your time. And the other thing to think about too as I think this is something that people, don't think about, is that you still have to do well in school. Like, it's not like colleges are thinking, oh, they're going through the college admissions process. Like, if they don't do well in class, or if their course selection changes dramatically, that colleges are going to be okay with that. Colleges look at all 4 years of the classes you're taking and the grades that you have. So no matter the time, when you're in grade 12, they're going to look at, first semester, first quarter, first trimester as you apply to college. And then they're definitely going to be looking at your final grades, after you enroll, to make sure that you still were serious about your studies. So it takes a really, really long time, to do this. And I think the quicker families and students can sort of wrap their head around the idea that this is like a marathon and not a sprint, I think it becomes a little bit easier to sort of roll with the punches and build sort of that consistent effort, which it takes, to be really successful in this process.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely takes a long time. And
Yeah.
I think starting early is a great option for a lot of students,
Mm-hmm.
at least just kind of looking at your college search, all of that. And that's, we talked about something that students can do right now to kind of get a few months ahead to maybe kind of help the workload that they're going to have later.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the biggest things that people stress about for college applications is the personal statement. So we got the question if you have any tips for starting that essay.
Yeah, so I always like to have students start relatively simple, which is honestly step one, is to know what the prompts are. And I know that's like super basic, but it's honestly the truth. I think sometimes families and students want to start talking about ideas, or they want to start writing, or sort of jump into the actual process of being creative. But if you don't really know like the prompts, and you don't know the differences, for example, between the Common App rules versus the Coalition App rules versus the UC application rules versus the Texas system rules, if you don't sort of understand, potentially, what the questions or the prompts are, how do you really sort of begin, writing, to some degree? Fortunately, a lot of the different application systems have sort of like a catch-all prompt, which is like basically write about like whatever, you want to. But I think that reading the prompts and sort of understanding word limits, and that the logistical piece of the process for essay writing can really help just sort of frame how you're thinking about, where to start, when it comes to different ideas. So that's number one. I think number two is not being afraid to just write. One of the things that I find often is that students, whether it's like they have multiple prompts or they just have one, prompt to answer, they get stuck. They feel like they have to almost in like one effort or in one try, sort of develop the best essay that they've ever written, and then never edit it again, or edit it once and then it's going to be done. So I think get started, take a couple of prompts that you are excited about, that sort of speak to you, in a way that, gets you excited about, what you may want to write about, and just start jotting down ideas. It doesn't have to be paragraphs upon paragraphs, but just jotting down like an outline. If you want to write about, a major event, that happened in your life, or a setback that occurred and how you sort of rebounded from that, those are going to be things that are going to take time and effort to develop a consistent theme, within that essay that is connected back, to sort of the narrative of your application. Is going to take time, to really figure out the consistency, of the different pieces of the essay that you're writing. So, not being afraid to just sort of start, but also developing outlines, notes, which prompt speaks to you, the most. I think one of the biggest things that students don't pay enough attention to is which prompts sort of speak to them, which prompts excite them. Because, as an admissions officer, if, you're excited about a topic, you're excited about a prompt, that excitement really comes through within your writing. And on the other hand, if you're sort of bored, or you're just writing it because you feel like, well, this topic feels sort of unique or distinct or different, I'm going to choose that one, then I'm going to know, because it's going to read as, kind of bland and not as exciting. Essay writing in many ways is like a conversation, and the more excited you can be about what you're writing, really, I think can translate to the admissions officer who is reading your application. I think additionally, realizing, and I said this with another question, but realizing that this process takes time is also really important. Understanding that it's not going to happen quickly. And in order to develop best, kind of set of essays, you want to sort of marinate, you sort of want to give it time, because your experiences, are going to shift, and change. Starting an essay over the spring, I think, is a tremendous idea. But maybe your summer, something happens that sort of shifts your outlook, kind of on your additional notes. It's okay to sort of go back and inject, that summer experience, kind of into what you were doing. So starting early is always a great idea, but also maintaining flexibility, I think, is really important as well. I think the last thing I'll say too is, especially as you're getting started and sort of going through development ideas and figuring out, which prompts you're going to choose, is you want to make sure that overall, over anything else, that the essay that you write helps the admissions officer get to know you the best way that they can, and the best as possible. Because in many cases, students will choose an essay and then spend most of it talking about something else, or they spend so much of their time, introducing, the story, that they sort of then will use the last, couple of sentences to then sort of like spin it back and do something like, well, this story was important to me because I learned X, Y, and Z. Please admit me to college. And you're kind of thinking, well, you spent 95% of the essay not talking about yourself. Like, what did I learn? Eventually, what you hope happens is that the admissions officer is taking, your entire application, bringing it to committee where they're talking about you and saying, well, Kayla wrote this, and in her personal statement, her supplements were about this. And if you're not utilizing that space wisely and using it as a way to help the admissions person get to know you, your personality, your motivations, your goals, then it really becomes a lost opportunity to help them get to know you a lot better. Because at the end of the day, that's really what this process is. Each component of the application helps to frame you and help shape you as an applicant. And really the essay is your own words, and really the best way, to help someone get to know you and who you are as a person. So taking advantage of that time and that space, and planning effectively, to do it that way is going to be really important.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a lot of pressure to do that, showing yourself in so few words. So I like your idea a lot of just kind of starting to write early, just kind of lay it all out there, and you knowing that you can fix it later, that you don't need to put so much pressure on yourself right at the beginning.
Yeah. There's so much pressure, and I think that in this entire process, that the faster you can sort of manage, I think, that stress and manage that pressure, I think, can be really helpful. And I think time allows you to do that, right? Starting in April, May, June is different, than starting in, August and September, right? Like, that's just a lot of time that you could be using, more effectively.
Yeah. So, last question here before I let you go. One
Yeah,
of the last questions we
sure.
got was about extracurricular activities and how critical they
Mm,
are, how admissions officers are really evaluating them.
yeah. So extracurriculars are incredibly important, especially as we think about sort of the more selective colleges within the United States. Um, Having a robust, vibrant, connected activities list, connected extracurriculars is going to be really critical. I think something that families and students maybe don't, think about very often, but I thought so much about when I was working in admissions offices is, you know, what is the composition of the incoming class going to be, and how does that impact the students that are already here? Every campus, is a community, no matter how big or how small the college may be. Every campus is has a personality, right? When you visit colleges or even going online, to learn more about universities and colleges, if you're sort of doing it correctly, you'll understand and begin to see, that school A is different than school B, and sort of these are the reasons why, right? There's a more sort of academic or maybe competitive spin to the campus versus maybe one that values balance maybe a little bit more. And neither one of those, kind of qualities is right or wrong, right? It's all about preferences and sort of what you want as a student, for your 4 years of college, to look like. But part of that is an admissions officer looking at your activities list and seeing, what have they done, what have they focused on, what impact, kind of have they had over their years of high school, and how will that translate, to my campus, right? And how that sort of translates to the type of community and the type of personality that we have as a college campus. So they become really critical. I think even more so, though, what becomes even more important is the connection between the choices you're making within your extracurriculars. Working in college campus, you want students that are specialists, who have, distinct interests, because a college campus in general, admissions officers want the campus to be sort of well-rounded and to have people of different strengths and different interests and different passions. But in order to create a well-rounded campus, you need students that are sort of more pointy, that have, one to two things that they're, really good at, to then sort of have a campus that becomes much more, well-rounded or sort of balanced in terms of the things that people will do. So as a student, having a strong list, and strong doesn't mean it needs to be a list of 20, 15. The Common App only allows you 10. It doesn't even mean 10. It could be 8, it could be 7. The number is not important, but what does become important is how long are you spending on these activities? What impact have you had? And how does it connect to the other pieces of your application? If you want to major in, psychology and your future career as a psychologist, it makes sense, to have as many extracurriculars as possible be connected, to psychology, because that is what colleges are going to want. They want the evidence that you have really thought this through, and it becomes even more impressive when you spend, your high school career sort of hyper focused on 1 to 2 things that are then very related to what you want to do, in college, and then potentially beyond that. So they become really, really important. I talk to students all the time, just about being deliberate about your extracurriculars and not just joining things because you think you have to, or because of the potential prestige, that these extracurriculars might give you. It's really more so about making sure that there's connection, that there's consistency. And admissions officers are spending time looking at these lists, reading these lists, because, outside of grades and test scores, while those things are obviously very important, the activities list, the essay, sort of those more kind of qualitative pieces of the application, in a lot of cases become even more important once they know that a student is capable academically. They want to be able to know that the student will sort of energize their campus and bring something different, than other people cannot bring. So yeah, they become really critical, really important. And it's also fun, to learn about a student, learn about their passions, learn about their interests, and how that will, translate, to the college campus in a really exciting way, hopefully.
Yeah, I think, without extracurriculars, everyone is kind of just a GPA and their test scores. And extracurriculars are a huge way that you can give yourself personality and you can stand out among all of that.
Yeah, especially because even within the same category of extracurricular, you can still be different, and you can still do something different enough, within the level of impact, that you're having, or, the type of students or people that you're working with. Like there are always opportunities to sort of take something that maybe many other people are doing and add just enough of your personality or spin to it that it feels very different, than what other people are doing. So you're exactly right, in the sense that they are, kind of really important. They help students to stand out in this process and really help admissions officers. You get to know someone really well, learn more about the personality, and get excited, about what they're doing. And, at the end of the day, if you can do something within your application, whether it's through your essays, your academics, your extracurriculars, to get an admissions officer sort of excited about you and sort of behind you in this process, that goes a long way, because most of the time applications are not as exciting, as you want them to be, and are not as appealing, as you want them to be. Especially for schools that are really, really selective, that are taking, less than 1 out of 10 students, kind of per round, that, the more that you can do something in that process to get someone excited about what you're doing, the better it gives you, the chances or opportunity to be able to get accepted.
Yeah. Standing out is definitely a huge, huge part of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think a lot of your answers, both about coronavirus and just college admissions in general, were amazing, and hopefully they answered all of our listeners' questions about all of that.
Yeah, my pleasure, Kayla. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, and of course, wishing you and your family well, and also all of our listeners, we hope they're still staying safe and staying healthy.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Zach.
Thank you, Kayla.
And of course, like I said, last episode we'll be continuing to post a lot of resources, of course, about college admissions, but also about COVID-19 and how it will be affecting that process. So I will be linking our blog page below, which you can check out. There's a lot of amazing resources that we've been putting out there. And as always, if you have any questions, if you'd like to request a future topic, you can follow us on social media at Ingenious Prep Anywhere, and you can ask your questions there. That's all for now. Thank you for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time as we continue our journey inside the admissions office.